question, isn't it? Anyone who can hear me, let me know. Or let,
We've got thumbs up in the chat, Stephen, so I'm now going to leave you again, and we'll crack on with this.
Okay, so thank you everybody for being here. First of all, I'm required to give the weasel words there. The opinions contained in this briefing aren't just mine, which is what I'm required to say. They also happen to be those of the world's mathematicians for about the last 3,000 years. Whether or not they reflect the policy of your organization, I have no idea. So that's that. We're going to be talking about doctrinal decision support tools, a specific one, comparison and decision matrices. Okay. Unfortunately, the way these are implemented within doctrinal literature on both sides of the Atlantic. So no claiming this isn't you. Yes, yes it is. These tools simply don't pass what I call the Giggle test, okay? We can discuss why they're so popular amongst the arithmetically illiterate later. So let's move on. First of all, I strongly suggest, especially senior officers present, listen up. Every decision or analysis made within the national security arena eventually results. The chain of causality may be obscure, but it either results in, or it should result in, increased probability of mission success, reduced casualties, unless that contradicts mission success, increased enemy casualties, and so on. Poor decision making and poor analysis really does cost lives, preferably yours, but unfortunately probably your subordinates if you're the decision maker. Same applies to me. So the question is, how do you handle this? How do you handle decision matrices? Are you a professional or are you an arithmomaniac? An arithmomaniac is somebody who thinks that simply putting numbers on things gives them insight. Okay, it's just, especially when it comes to putting numbers on subjective qualitative factors. So we're going to look at some approaches that are endemic, both in the US Department of Defense and in the UK Ministry of Defense, with specific examples from US joint literature, US Army literature, and DSTL literature. Okay, the reason we're going to look at these is because they form the foundation, the basis of many other complex or complicated decision-making tools or decision support tools. If you pick those tools apart, down at the bottom in the foundation, you'll find multi-criteria decision matrices of some sort or other. And if those are poor quality, the entire superstructure falls apart. Unfortunately, they're buried deep and hidden, and it's often hard to find and realize that you've got problems. I have not cherry-picked the examples I'm going to talk to you about. They do come from doctrine, and there's a sort of schizophrenia amongst decision makers. These techniques are written up in their doctrine. Then they'll turn around and say, oh, but Stephen, we don't really use them. Then I'll turn around and watch them using them over and over again. Okay, it's quite interesting. Okay, so there's two problems that we'll be addressing. One is the use of ordinal numbers as opposed to cardinal numbers. You can use ordinal numbers, rank orderings. You can use them as much as you like. Sometimes it's all you can use, but you can't do arithmetic on them. Okay, I'm sorry guys, 3,000 years of math, that was established 3,000 years ago. Please don't bore me and embarrass yourself by telling me how you do it. If you're going to use rank orders and then start doing arithmetic on them, at best you get a good answer by sheer coincidence. And you might as well use what I call the regimental monkey approach. It's faster, gives you the same kind of response, and it provides endless entertainment for the junior officers watching. I'll tell you what that is later if you insist. So here is the one from US Joint Publication. You should recognize this. We have courses of action across in the columns. Okay, they're selected by the staff independently of the criteria, which are down in the left-hand column, which are selected by the boss or the decision maker. The boss or decision maker sets the rates. The staff go and score how well each course of action satisfies each criteria, multiplies by the weight, adds them all up. Okay, so far so good. The problem here is those scores, as well as the weights, are rank ordered. Anyone who thinks the rank ordering stuff is a good idea, and you're faced with such a person, ask them a very simple question. Which of the 6 methods of rank ordering do you use, sir? Because each one gives a different answer if you have ties. I'm willing to bet sir won't know. So here we have the US Army one. It's identical approach. It's just been rotated on its side. Courses of action are in the rows. Criteria are in the columns, okay? Not a problem. Now we'll come across the Atlantic and take a look at the DSTL approach here that was briefed Action Connections a couple of years ago and is in the literature. What you have here are the X and the Y coordinates are the results of 2 multi-criteria decision matrices using rank orders. You go back in the literature, take a look, you'll find that's what's going on. You then put them up on a XY chart, and you pick an area or a point on that chart, and now you pick what grade of gray the pixel is that you land on. Then you go across to the right and you've got a bar chart of pixel grade pixels, and you find the same gray pixel color, and that tells you what the final answer is. The algorithm of how you choose what color pixel, what graying pixel should be where on that chart is not provided. But I can tell you what it is, because look at the grading there. It's linear top with a negative 45-degree angle, a -1 slope. If you look at the contours of equal graying there. So bottom left to top right goes white to black. Not quite sure why you want to gray things out and then go back to try and pick another gray, but there you go, that's what it is. And of course you've got a problem over here on the y-axis. You've just done a arithmetic on a bunch of rank orders. You've done arithmetic on a bunch of rank orders on the x-axis. You then combined them using another bunch of arithmetic on rank orders, and so on. Doesn't pass the Giggle test. Now, rank ordering. Yes, just because 3 + 4 = 7, it really doesn't mean that you can replace a major general with a lieutenant colonel and a major. Or how about replacing a major general with 7 lieutenants? It just doesn't make sense to add up the things that are rank ordered and claim that they equate to adding up the numerals of the rank orders. Okay, most of us know this, and yet you see it all the time in decision making. If you can replace your major general with 7 lieutenants or a lieutenant colonel major, that's a problem that's not solved by decision analysis. That's solved with a single 9mm round. So let's now start digging in some detail. We're going to assume we already have a decision statement, problem statement, or question, and we're going to go into what are the actual components. Bear with me. This is not as trivial as it sounds. You are about to fall face forward onto the punji stick in a few slides. So first you have the criterion set up by the boss. Okay, sometimes called the governing factors in the literature. The boss also sets up the weights, tells you how important they are. If you're insisting on using numeric approaches, from this point forward, we're going to be using cardinal numbers. The staff independently set up their alternatives. Then they score how well each alternative satisfies each criteria. And now For each alternative, you have two vectors, a vector of scores against the criteria and a separate vector of weights, and your job is to combine the two into a single number. Let me remind you, the handbook of mathematical functions, not the encyclopedia, the handbook that's on my shelf has over 1,000 pages in it. So you've got a lot of choices as to what function you choose. So you've got this problem. What should that function be? Okay. Now, we all know roughly what it is. We've got a good idea. You know, we've already addressed it in the doctrinal literature. The scalarization function mostly that's used is that one. You sum the product of the weights with the scores. Okay. But what is that function actually doing? I implied it earlier when I said the gray patch in the middle of the DSTL example was linear, top left to bottom right. Those of you who remember your high school math will recognize a straight line curve. Okay. The question is, how should we really pick this function under the total? Is it good enough just to multiply and add up? It's very simple. Everybody does it. But as we've noticed recently, just because lots of people do something doesn't actually make it a good idea. I've heard claims that it's best practice. No, actually it isn't. If you go into the engineering literature and actually do some reading, it is not best practice. It is very commonly used. It grew out of the civilian world as a thinking tool. It was picked up by the military and the government as a thinking tool, and then it slowly morphed into becoming something that people tried to use as real guidance as opposed to a thinking tool. Okay, we are going to look now. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay. So we're going to look at what contours, we're going to look at the shape of the curve, okay, that your scalarization function uses. You will recognize this, it's a map. The equivalent is you have an X and a Y coordinate there, a two-dimensional space with height, and you have equal height lines. Each line represents equal height. So you move to the left or the right of the line and you're going higher or lower. And we're going to look at similar idea contours with indecision approaches, where in this case the X and Y dimension on the map will be represented by governing criteria, and a point on the map represents how well a particular alternative scores against that criteria, and its height, okay, is the actual number. So let's take a look. So that's 2 dimensions, and a third. You can have 3 dimensions, 3 criteria, and this, for example, salinity, pressure, other factors in the oceans, for example. You have, in this case, you'd have 3 physical dimensions, 3 criteria, and the contours are a 2-dimensional space. Say you have a decision space of 12 criteria, you'd have an 11-dimensional contour space of equal value events, or equal value, whatever it is you're measuring. Hard to visualize, that's why we have math, that's why we have matrices, that's why we have computers. Okay, let's now look at, let's go down to the simplest possible situation. We have only one evaluation criteria. Okay, and I have my my position, my object. Yeah, example could be I've got a table, I've got bags of cash on the table. You need to walk away. You can pick one bag of cash and then you want to walk away, and the criteria is most cash. This isn't really a decision, it's a measurement problem. So you pick the bag with the most cash and you walk away. Here's the punji stick question, the one that sounds trivial, but I'm afraid is not, okay? Do you measure how good something is in a situation like this by how far away it is from the worst possible alternative on the left, or how close it is to the best possible alternative on the right. Okay, so which is it? So, you know, one is tempted to say it doesn't make any difference. I hope that's what you do say, because guess what? It does make a difference. So now let's take a look at two evaluation criteria. And while I'm here, I'm going to turn on the axes. Okay, we've got two evaluation criteria here. I've got A and I've got X, which I've named X and Y, and I have two alternatives. Each alternative is scored against its evaluation criteria, which gives it a point on the space. Okay, so let's have a look at how far away you are. So if you measure by how far away you are from the worst possible alternative, B wins. Okay, that line, that blue line, is a contour. Anything on that line has the same value, okay, as alternative B. Anything to the upper right has a higher value. Anything to the lower left has a lower value. Now let's take a look at how close you are, okay, to the best possible result. So A beats B if you're measuring how far away you are from the worst. The problem is B beats A if you're measuring how close you are to the best alternative. So two entirely reasonable ways of measuring value, of collapsing two numbers, in this case the value against Y and the value against X, into one value. Okay, two entirely reasonable ways of measuring goodness here. Distance from the worst and closeness to the best. Unfortunately, they give you opposite results. Okay, and A can be any item within this sort of top left weird shape, okay, in which A sits. Any item in there will give you this problem, as is any item down to the lower right. And let's face it, most decisions are trade-offs, and the alternatives will lie on a kind of line that runs roughly top left to bottom right in a world like this. You could, of course, go back to the one that you're all used to, okay, which is running a straight line approach. Okay, you could run a straight line approach. That's the multiply by the weights and add them up. And in that case, that black line is the line of equal contour. The problem is A can be anywhere in here. Okay, so A and B being equal, or A being better than B, A being less than B, all depends on where A is in this space where A is sitting. But nevertheless, A and B are reversed depending on whether you pick A is better than B or B is better than A. Okay, so you've got an immediate problem. What shape curve should you be picking? And simply saying, well, we'll pick a straight line, it's simpler, doesn't really work, and I'll show you why. So let's for a second just look at, look at this shape. This is the worst possible contour. The distance from the worst alternative is the worst possible way of measuring how anything is good. Why? Because as you move along this curve of equal value, okay, as you give up value on X, you should be gaining value on evaluation criteria Y. But as you do so, as you approach zero satisfaction for evaluation criteria X, you get less and less increase in your evaluation criteria Y, which is entirely counterintuitive. Okay. Same is true as if you go lower and lower on evaluation criteria Y, you get less and less incremental growth in the value against X. There's the other problem, of course. The boss has told you these are equally weighted criteria. They're both important. So there's no point in telling him, gee, I've got this system, this alternative for you. We throw away one of your evaluation criteria, but it's just as good as one in which we keep both of them. This just doesn't make sense. The same happens to be true to a lesser extent, okay, for the linear approach. Okay, here at least, as you give up value on one criteria, you're proportionately gaining value on the other, but it's only proportionate. And eventually you hit the y-axis, the x or the x-axis. Eventually you end up having to explain to your boss how you have an alternative which entirely throws away an entire important evaluation criteria, but is just as good as one that sits somewhere in the middle and partially satisfies both. It just doesn't, it really doesn't make sense. If, on the other hand, you look at this one, okay, as you give up value on one criteria, you get an accelerated value on the other. Okay, and this gives us a clue. Okay, unfortunately, eventually you end up with a zero on one of the criteria or the other criteria. So the problem now is, okay, the intuition is we want concave upwards, not linear, and certainly not concave downwards as our scalarization function. Okay, but somehow we want to not hit we want it to be asymptotic to the two axes. Yeah, sorry about that. There really is math in this, but it is the doctrinal writers who insisted on using math, so suck it up, guys. The problem is this best alternative. This best alternative is a fixed point. Well, what happens if I want to value something greater than 10? I've got something that's valued at a 1, and I have something else that's valued 20 times as good as that. I could go to a half and 10, I could normalize, but you've got problems. So let's, for a second now, jump forward and ask ourselves, what is the minimum reasonableness requirement, okay, for a scalarization function, or even what's the minimal reasonableness criterion for a thinking tool or a decision support tool? Okay, so I'm going to quote you something. It's a decision aid. For a decision aid to be reasonable, a minimum requirement is, okay, a matrix that perfectly represents the commander's available information and guidance should be capable of recommending the same range of decisions that a rational commander might make. Or such a matrix will not forbid a decision that a rational commander might make. A rational commander is one who does not make decisions that contradicts his or her own guidance. And yes, I understand that with serious decisions, you want to go through it several times, because even the boss, especially the boss, may change his or her opinion about what criteria are important, what's their relative importance, and so on. But given a set of, given a perfect staff, given a perfectly rational boss, okay, you can't have the boss then flatly contradict his or her requirements. That either means the boss is lying or is irrational, and we're just going to dismiss those two options. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on here. Let's assume right now I've got the criterion y has a weight of 3, because the boss has said, okay, my x and y criterion are both important. 3, however, is critical. I'm going to give it a weight of 3. Okay, so that's the, because y is weighted at a 3, it's 3 times as important as x. Any incremental increase in y is worth 3 increases in x, okay? And so that green line represents everything that would score the same as C. A scores better than C, scores better than B. And a rational commander may very well say, okay, A is critical. Look how high A is compared to B and C. So I'm going to pick A. And indeed, so far so good. We don't really have a problem here, okay? But say he reversed that. Okay, x is 3 times as important as y. So we'll go down to about a third on y, 1 on x, and we have b. B is better than C, better than A. So far, so good. If they're both equally important, the boss says, you know what, I want to balance the advantages and risks of both. Okay. How do I get to, here we go. C wins. C is better than A and B. So far, so good. The problem arises is C is not quite as good. Let's put C down there. Okay. The staff has come back. They've done a reassessment. C isn't quite as good as we thought it was. Well, the boss can still, a rational boss who gets to choose what risks he or she's willing to eat in order to gain advantages, may still pick A or B or C. A scores really high, B on Y but low on X, vice versa for B. C kind of balances in the middle. The boss says, okay, I want to balance. The problem is this matrix now will never give you C as an answer, okay? A and B both beat C. Okay, well, let's play with the weights. Let's increase the weight of criterion Y. A beats C beats B. You can see increasing the criteria of Y, weight of Y versus X, will never give you C as a winner. It will always give you A as a winner. Increasing the weight of X compared to Y will always give you B as a winner, never C as a winner. Okay, and that is because C is inside what's called the Pareto optimal contour. Okay, C is inside the line that connects A and B, and the real problem is the fact that you're using a linear approach. Okay, what you really want is concave from above. Concave from above will allow a rational commander to pick A or B or C depending on the weights, relative weights of A or B, as you would expect. Okay. Now eventually, if C moves too far down here, okay, the boss at some point is going to say, I've given up too much on both. I'm willing to give up a lot more on one in order to gain a significantly accelerated value on the other. I want to go to A or I want to go to B. Where that point is, where the boss decides he's willing to give one up, is an entirely personal choice of the boss. There is no math or physics that will tell you what that should be. So you've got another factor, subjective factor, to include in this. And that's a question of discussion with the staff. Okay. So let's go back to here. My conclusion: if you must use numeric decision matrices, do not use ordinal numbers as the inputs. Okay. Use cardinal numbers and use a concave up scalarizing function. Product, not an addition of scores. Think about this for a second. If I score 0 on one of my important governing factors, that should throw the decision out if there are others that balance them. Okay. So we can now switch to questions. We have what, about 10 minutes?
Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Thanks for that. I love that. You know, it makes complete sense. And I think, you know, when we first discussed this 7 years or so ago, the problems still exist, don't they? We still have these, you know, ordinal scoring systems that maybe will give a, you know, a false premise for a decision on what you're actually buying and why you're actually buying it. What led you to this way of thinking, and was it your experience through procurement stuff before, the people that were coming to you and saying, look, we bought this kit but it's not what we wanted?
It was an odd journey. First of all, I bought into the, you know, this multi-criteria decision analysis approach with rank orders. 9 times out of 10, you can only rank order. That's one of the problems. But having rank ordered, I'm looking at this and thinking, hey, this is really cool. But I just got deeply suspicious about it. Then I discovered voting theory and realized, gosh, voting theory is the voting profiles are mathematically identical to these decision approaches. And you read about Kenneth Arrow's impossibility theorem, and you realize that everything about voting using ordinal voting scores, 3 or more alternatives, everything that's wrong about that is wrong about ordinarily scored decision matrices, because they are mathematically identical.
Yeah.
So then I went back and looked at what was going on there, and realized, okay, it's no good just saying, you know, you're doing rubbish, sir. You've got to provide an alternative. And so the alternative is the following. If the best you can do is rank order, and that is often the best you can, in fact, that's the least you can do, because if you cannot at least rank order alternatives, then you're not a professional. You're not qualified to be having a discussion in the arena.
Right.
So you rank order. You should rank order the criteria. And you
but there's bias as well. There's bias as well in the system, isn't there, as to what gets given what rank, what's the most important. So it's the actual bias of the person scoring it.
Yes, but even if you take all of that out,
yeah,
but the way you get around that bias is you do not let them just rank order. You make them write down, since this is subjective, qualitative, subjective, professional judgment. You make them write down a minimum of 3 sentences that say how this alternative satisfies this criteria, and a minimum of 3 sentences of how it doesn't satisfy.
Right.
You throw that up on a matrix, and the boss reads it all and makes a holistic judgment. The boss is paid to make decisions, not to be told what to do by a badly structured bunch of numbers.
Brilliant. So you are now going to come on to what we're going to do about it.
Well, it's first of all, learn how to use rank orderings properly. In other words, you know, don't do math on rank orders. Any rank ordering you give should actually be the summary of your analysis. The data that goes into your analysis, okay, is the war game, the simulation, the exercise, whatever. Then you write down in words the advantages and disadvantages. You might then rank order them based on what's in the words, but you don't jump straight to rank orders, and you certainly don't do arithmetic. And you look at the words, and the boss, you know, the staff either make a recommendation based on the risks inherent in the disadvantages and the benefits inherent in the advantages. If you're going to use numbers, though, because you have something that you can justifiably put numbers on, objective cardinal numbers, then you should be using a concave up scalarization function.
Okay, so we've got a question from William Burnett Boothroyd. Thank you in the Q&A panel. Do you think that there is a dangerous tendency to rely on mathematical analysis when considering qualitative decision making in a command scenario?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, you should not rely on mathematical analysis unless the numbers are objective and you know, are objective. But if you have a single qualitative factor in a decision, everything else being quantitative, you have a qualitative problem, because the qualitative factor can be greater than or less than, if you try and turn it into number, than any of the other numbers. Yeah, absolutely. And the question is why? In a command scenario, you've got this horrible problem of having to make decisions with no good alternatives, really. So people are going to die. You're going to be second-guessed afterwards. The desire for the two things. There's a desire for some sort of tool to help you make it. And unfortunately, there's a desire to point back at the math and say, not my fault, the math said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a way of, yeah. It's the ultimate Teflon shoulder bit, isn't it?
It is. There's a saying in the financial world, no one got fired for recommending IBM stock, even when IBM stock goes down.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's blue chip. Who would have known?
No, absolutely. Right, we've still got a lot of people in here, so obviously just enjoying what we're saying at the moment. Do we have any more questions or actually comments about what Stephen's been talking today about? I think you put everything super clearly out, and a difficult concept beautifully, and make it clear for everybody. Have we got any comments from people in the session right now about anything that Stephen said, or something that you'd like him to address in the future, maybe? So, Stephen, can you tell us anything else that you're working on right now, or that you'd like to talk about as well?
Well, first of all, let me say that if anybody has questions or comments or wants more information, just send me an email and I'll respond. You can either get it from Tess or from the DSET site.
Well, if you drop it into the chat as well.
Needs a simple write-up with lots of pictures. I thought I'd given you pictures. Go to my website and go to the Puppet Master section of my website. We'll be posting it there shortly. And there's other good Puppet Mastery stuff there. That's where I found. So qualitative, basically any of those tools that assist you with decision making, but ignore the the math that they put in there for doing math on rank orders, etc. Basically, Excel, or if you're on some sort of online, shared spreadsheet tool. The real tool. I'm sorry, it lies between your ears. Okay, it's wetware. It's not software or hardware.
Or actually, or your between your ears, actually, because people can always come to you, can't they, Stephen, and ask for your help?
Yeah, I'll pick apart. My boss used to ask me when he thought he had a good decision, well, Stephen, what could possibly go wrong? Ooh, let me tell you, and I'd start running through them. I'm the what is it? The red team guy, the devil's advocate.
That's it, devil's advocate. Yeah, I love doing a red team, actually.
Yeah.
You have to be kind but firm, I think. He was not kind.
Vicious.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to know what the regimental monkey method is?
Go.
The regimental monkey method is you take your three alternatives, write them on a piece of paper, nail them to the wall, bring the regimental monkey in, feed him bananas, poke him with a stick until he gets mad and starts throwing his poo around. Whichever colour on the wall gets hit by poo first, there's a 33% chance it's the best one. That's as good as doing rank orders and adding up, and you've got an answer. It's no worse than the rank ordering and adding up the rank orders method. And as I said, all your junior officers will have hours of fun watching you leap about, watching the colonel leap about trying to dodge the poo.
I mean, that's amazing. And I think easier to justify when they've made the wrong decision.
Well, exactly. It was the monkey, sir.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Stephen, you are, as ever, a complete joy. And thank you so much for joining us at DSET this year. And are you going to be staying around on the platform for a bit so that people can contact you directly?
Yes. And I'll post. Is it this chat I post my email into, the one that we're talking on at the moment?
Event chat. So put it in the big event chat rather than the session chat, because then everybody can see it in there, because the session chat will disappear once this is over.
I see. Click on events at the top and then click on chat. Got it.
That's it. Yeah. So Stephen's going to pop his email in there. You can always go to him directly as well and message him in here, and do make the most of him, because he's here for today, and it's a fantastic opportunity. Stephen, genuinely, thank you. You're getting cheers in the chat now.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Well deserved. well deserved. And I know that you cut that right down for us as well. So it's very much appreciated. We've got a lot to get into.
40 minutes.
I know, like really amazing. So we are now going to move to coffee and networking. Everyone have a quick rest break. And then we are going to meet back in the sessions at 1500 hours with Hadian. Thanks, Stephen, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye.